Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride, let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/180, and you can email the show, pedalshift@pedalshift.net, or call the voicemail hotline at 202-930-1109, and check Pedalshift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody. This is Tim Mooney back for the 180th edition of the Pedalshift Project. Thank you so much for joining. On this edition of the show, S24Os for the busy bike camper and a Tour Journals Volume 16 addendum. That felt like a lot of syllables coming out of my mouth right now, but it's happening here on this episode. Fall means a lot of riding on the C&O for me, you probably know that. But lately I find I don't have quite the time that I've typically had in the past for a big through ride. So what's a time-strapped bicycle tourist like me to do? On this episode, we revisit the concept of the S24O, and that's a great way to get some adventure when life, work, family, whatever prevents a longer trip. This is another in-the-field recording of my thoughts on S24Os while on an S24O. So yeah, super meta, right? And it also has the accompanying wind and other soundscapes added on like you're used to hearing when I do this kind of in-the-field recording. I think that the first segment in particular is a little bit on the windy side. I think it's still very listenable, but you know, if it gets a little bit annoying, stick with it. It's going to be getting better in the later segments. I think there's like 3 or 4 separate segments in this whole episode. If you like this type of an episode, I invite you to stick around because in a couple of weeks, we're going to have another episode on the C&O with a decidedly canine twist. There's your hint. One last thing. This trip has a secret mission that cleans up the end of Tour Journals Volume 16 in a couple of fun ways. So let's get rolling.
It is the last few remaining days of meteorological summer. Well, we're past meteorological summer. This would be the last few days of seasonal summer, technical summer. And I have the opportunity to do an S24O. And that means a sub 24-hour, I think, out and back. I think that's what it stands for. The O has always been, I'll have to look that up. Maybe I'll actually have that for you. But they're called S24Os when you have the opportunity to do an overnight, but not much else. And I think that so many folks who are listening are, beginners or otherwise don't have the kind of time to pull off 2 weeks off to go ride from DC to Cincinnati like I did this year. Now, I was pretty fortunate to be able to block that time out. Well, as the year has gone on, I haven't been as fortunate to be able to get those big blocks of time. So, a lot of long weekend kind of situations will pop up here and there. And then occasionally, you're going to have an opportunity where it's like, well, I can get out of town before sunset, ride in a relatively straight line to a campsite, camp, enjoy, and then ride back in the next morning. And then kind of resume whatever plans you've got. An S24O can sometimes be done, depending on your scenarios, on a work day, and nobody can be the wiser if you've got a gym or some other shower facility available to you. I certainly have heard folks doing that. I do not have a work day tomorrow, or at least not a traditional work day, and therefore I will be making a somewhat more leisurely return into town compared to what I would normally be doing if I were a traditional kind of 9 a.m. start or a 9 a.m. meeting that so many folks have. And that's one of the beauties of the C&O for me, because it starts literally in Washington, D.C., not far from where I live. super easy for me to get out. Now, I know that's not a resource that's available to a lot of folks, and I think what many people will do for an S24O is they'll use a vehicle or public transportation to kind of bridge that gap. Many folks are able to ride their way to their campsite, but some combination of it is the way that you want to go. And the beauty of it is that it's a low commitment kind of a thing. And when I say low commitment, it means that you are certainly going out, you're doing it, but because it's not some crazy multi-day adventure, man, the amount of gear you have to bring is so much more minimal. And what I find when I do S24Os is sometimes I'll do, I guess what I'll call here luxury S24Os, and that is I'll bring basically a big block of ice and some cold drinks and food that doesn't need to be prepared, and that way I can ride hard or semi-hard, because I am doing the show for you right now. Not exactly putting down the hammer, but point being is that I can get out there and really enjoy some almost car camping like amenities, something I don't normally do when I'm out on bike tour. I will say, as a sidebar, I have in the past done some of these concepts on bike tour about having something cold. When I am near a town that's close to a campground, I'll hit the grocery store and get a bunch of things that will stay cold. On one occasion, I remember I got a bag of frozen vegetables to keep my beers cold. It was cheaper than ice, and I actually could eat it. It actually worked out very well. But if you don't decide to do the luxury version like I'm doing, you can almost bike pack without having technically bike packing gear. You can really drill down on what you bring. Maybe you don't even need to bring a change of clothes, or a really small amount. Maybe just a different pair of shorts or something like that, or underwear, or whatever is your need for changing. Because when you really think about it, you can essentially go down to only must-haves with an S24O if you don't need to bring crazy amounts of other things along with you. Maybe your repair kit can be much more minimal. You're not going to be going so far out, and presumably you could get a lift back, or maybe even get mass transit back, depending on where you're starting from and going to, or call somebody to get a ride. He may not be that far away. So for a more late version of it, you'd be bringing essentially your sleep kit, your tent, and your bike. And if you don't need to worry about changing clothes, well, you just go like that. Bring whatever food you would need. Sometimes that might be, I've already eaten, or maybe I just bring a couple of bars and that's about it. So I think that you could do S24Os in a variety of different ways. I happen to like this way that I'm doing, or at least I've been kind of doing this more often when I do them, just because there's kind of a nice little bit of a luxury of finishing up a good solid ride, and it doesn't have to be terribly long. Mine tend to be somewhere in the 15 to 20 mile range. That'll be what it'll be tonight. And to finish off and then have the luxury of a cold carbonated beverage, that's pretty great. And it's very simple to do. I think I've mentioned this before. We get those kind of weekly meal kits for us at home. They always come with a cold pack inside. Apparently they're quasi-recyclable, so I do that. But I keep quite a few in the freezer because when you fill your freezer with icy things, it tends to make it more efficient, uses less energy, so bonus there. But also, I have an automatic cold pack to bring out with me that, if I so choose, I can dispose of it properly on the way back. This time I won't, because I'll just carry it right back. And that ends up working out really well for me. I don't have a ton of food with me. I had peanut butter and an apple in the late afternoon, early evening, as I was getting all my stuff together. Didn't have dinner. I'm bringing it with me. I went to the tried and true dinner of, oh shoot, I haven't figured out what I'm going to do. Oh, I'll just order something from Subway and pick it up. So I did that. I did get a good sized sandwich. I got the foot long because I'll probably be pretty hungry, and I'll mow that down. So I should talk a little bit about this particular S24O now that I've talked about some of the different ways you can do it. This one is kind of two things. It's not going to end up being, unfortunately, the completion of the original Tour Journals Volume 16, Sultry Summer on the C&O, but it is retracing at least a little bit of that third missing day. And so I, of course, will not be starting in Harper's Ferry, as you can probably tell by now. I have started from DC. I'm going in that direction. I'm not going to be doing halfway to Harper's Ferry and back to make the mileage, not by any stretch. It's just sort of like an addendum onto it. But it is completing a mission that I was originally going to be completing as a part of the C&O through ride that wasn't. And that was to fix an error of a prior S24O. So it does kind of bookend things nicely. I made the mistake of leaving behind one of my hammock straps in a wild camp off of the C&O. So I am going to go liberate it from its hanging place. It's in a spot that I would be incredibly surprised if anybody saw it. I'm usually pretty good at this stealth camping thing, particularly here on the C&O. I try to respect everything pretty well. I know I'm doing something I'm not supposed to be doing. I don't know if I'm still on Park Service land there, but I found a good spot before, and I actually sent myself the geographic coordinates unwittingly, so I do know precisely where I was, so it should be pretty easy to find it. It was one of my new straps, and I kind of would like it back. By the time you all hear this, it will be very much fall, but as I'm riding, I think it seems, based on everything that I've been reading from my favorite weather nerds blog, the Capital Weather Gang, that this might be it for summer. Today was about a high of 91, so when I left, it was right around there. Now, as the sun is slipping below the tree lines, it's definitely cooled off a lot. Not so much that it's cold by any stretch of the imagination. I don't expect it to be terribly cold tonight. Probably just into the mid-60s. But a cold front is coming through, and fall temperatures are supposed to hit later this week. So if this isn't the last truly hot day of the season, it's pretty close. So another good reason to get out, just to have one more kind of warm camping night before I start having to think about colder weather gear for going out, which, trust me, after a hot summer like this, you're not going to hear me complain about having a chilly night. One of the downsides, of course, of finding ourselves in mid-September, as I am right now, is that sun is going down earlier than ever. And it's really, to me, sort of the end of really the golden time of bike touring season, although I do have to say I love riding in the fall, perhaps most of all, but you can't bang out the miles the same way unless you're happy doing a little night riding. Now tonight, I will certainly be riding a little bit after the sun slips down, but what I'm hoping is that I'm able to put in the miles quickly enough so that I got the last bit of twilight that will help me through the end here. And that's kind of the key to a good S24O, is being able to go to a place in time so you can make camp in a way that's comfortable for you. Some folks don't want to do any tent pinching or pitching. Did I say pinching? It sounded like pinching to me. Tent pitching, enunciate, or hammock hanging in the dark. Some people are perfectly comfortable with it. I tend to be agnostic, I think, although I certainly do the vast majority of my riding during daylight hours, and almost exclusively for bicycle touring. But I've got my lights, I've got a headlamp, it will all work out just fine. You know, the other option, of course, is to just kind of call it a little early and go to the same stealth camp that I went before and enjoy things there. So maybe I'll assess all that when we get a little further down. I'm almost actually to within a not a very, we'll call it a stone's throw from that campsite. So we'll kind of decide and check back in a bit.
Good morning from Swain's Lock. This is the campground, what I always like to call the first campground. Of course, that's very DC-centric of me to say. The first spot where one can camp without a group permit. There is one that's closer to DC. It's called Marsden Track. I've probably talked about this before. I'm a broken record. My apologies. But, you know, it's funny. It used to be one I tried to avoid. But when I can get to it and it ends up working out for me, it is one of the better ones. It's got a ton of campsites. It's beautiful. It's got a beautiful view of the river. And I'll tell you what, last night, you know, the sun was coming down. It was down. And, you know, it was really dusky. So I really didn't get a good look at things last night, but you could really tell that it was just beautiful. And then waking up this morning was just amazing. Just to unzip that little bit corner of your rain fly down and looking out. You know, that's the kind of thing that makes an S24O feels so good. It's like, it's almost like you're cheating. You're getting away with something, right? You know, you're waking up and you get that reward. The other thing that's amazing is it really feels like it transitioned from summer to fall last night. As I'm standing here right now, I'm watching yellow leaves just sort of begin to flutter down to the ground while there's still a green tunnel up right now. The canal in this area is filled, and you can look out and you've got, it's probably a peak foliage, if you will, on the canal. Like all of the greenery that's grown on it is at peak, and you know it's all downhill from here. But floating on the water towards the weir that you can probably hear in the background here, yellow leaves that have started to fall. And most importantly, it's one of those mornings where it's like just a little bit cooler than comfortable in shorts and a t-shirt. You know, it's like, oh, if I had a long sleeve, I probably would have put it on. I don't. It's fine. I'm you know, moving around. I'll be all right. But that's the first time I felt that, not on the West Coast, since it got warm this year. And that to me is a good sign of fall. So, as I mentioned, for my S24O mission, today I'm going to ride back and I am going to try to get that strap. I did pass it last night and I wanted to get it, and then I thought, you know what? I want some more miles, and I kind of want to camp in a place that is a little flatter, a little less overgrown. I didn't want to have to push my bike through anything to get to the wild camp. I just wasn't in the mood for it last night, and I'm glad I did it because it's just beautiful here. Not that it isn't beautiful there too, but I feel like for whatever reason, it felt more like playing by the rules this time, which is fine by me. Anyways, next stop, taking care of camp. I'll be drinking some of my cold brew, which I brought with me. Talked about that on the past episode, the live show there. And it's so nice to have. But on top of that, because I had the ice block or the ice pack, I should say, it's super cold, and it just is so refreshing to wake up that way. So, anyways, see we're coming. I think I'm gonna duck back into the campsite and get rolling. I've begun rolling, and you'll hear me getting back on my bike. And as I was rolling, I was passing by trees with large, almost teardrop leaves, really huge. I was thinking, oh, I wonder if those are pawpaw trees. If you recall, I believe it was last fall, my final
fall ride of the year, I ran into, and I think I talked about this on the pod, and if I didn't, apologies if this is a repeat, and apologies if I never told you this in the first place. I ran into one of the trail ranger folks. These are volunteers who will, help people out if they have any mechanicals, or, let the park rangers know if there's anything that needs their attention. And he was very excited to see me because he had a pawpaw fruit and wanted to expose me to the wonderful world of the pawpaw. If that sounds familiar to you, the name Pawpaw is, of course, the name of the tunnel and the town in West Virginia. And it is a tree. It is native to a relatively narrow swath of this region. And as I was thinking about it, I thought, when I get back, I'm going to have to Google to find out when they're ripe. My supposition was that they would get ripe later in the fall. And as it turned out, within, 60 seconds of me even thinking that, I encounter a pawpaw fruit. And I picked it up, took a picture of it. Hope I'll put that in the show notes for y'all. But I'm super excited because I'm going to bring that one home with me. The pawpaw fruit is an unusual fruit. I will try to describe it, but it feels like it's from science fiction. It is shaped like a mango, maybe a touch more oblong, a little bit longer than wide. And if you didn't know what it was, you would not be crazy to think, somebody had a mango on their bike and lost it if they encountered one on the ground. When you open them up, the color of the inside is bright yellow, as I recall, banana yellow almost. But you don't eat the flesh. You eat these enormous black seeds. I think they're seeds. They may be something else, but I assume they're seeds. And coated around them is the actual edible part. And you kind of pop them in your mouth and sort of scrape off the flesh, I guess I'll call it, that's around those seeds. And the flavor is, I kid you not, a perfect cross between a banana, so the real sweetness and tropical notes of a banana, and a mango. Really fascinating fruit, and the way that you eat it and the way that it presents, as I said, is very science fiction-y, Star Trek-y. I don't know why I picked Star Trek over Star Wars, but I'll go with Star Trek. So it feels foreign. It's a wild fruit, obviously organic. So and what I found interestingly, I think it was over the summer I read a post in one of the many DC-ish blogs that I will read, and apparently there are folks at farmers markets that are starting to take advantage of pawpaws. They are being grown commercially. They're rather expensive because they are kind of an exotic thing to grow commercially. But probably the biggest pawpaw grove in the world is the C&O, I would imagine. I may be wrong on that, but I do know that's where I encounter most of the trees. I believe there are male and female trees, so as I looked up, I wasn't seeing a ton of fruits until I saw one particular tree that had one. So I think that they even segregate out that way. So interesting stuff, and I'm really excited to bring it back. Now, this one was on the ground, which I was told by the trail ranger last year is kind of when you know they're ripe. So on the ground, but not, rotting or anything like that, or full of insects, as I'm sure that they would get. So I grabbed it. I'll get home, I'll cut it open, and if it is edible or presents as edible, we're going to go for it. It looks like it went down overnight. So I think it's safe to at least try, and at the very least I can cut it open and show Kimberly this weird Star Trek fruit. the C&O giveth. I am rolling right by Great Falls right now, and it is blissfully empty. Normally, I would get off and check out the overlook, maybe even bring you along, but I feel like I do that every time, and all you would hear is a lot of white noise. But if you ever do the C&O on the DC side, great visitor center here. It's always very crowded. Be mindful of that, unless you're coming in a more of an off-season. But this is a coffee run that I will do periodically, especially in the early and late parts of the season. You know, I'll get up and I'll roll the couple-hour ride round trip and have a coffee at the Great Falls overlook. It's really beautiful, really great escape, great way to start your day if you get up early enough to do it. And I'm happy to say I get to include it as part of my day today because of this S24O. Another benefit, you get that nice, I don't have to do a 30-mile round trip to see it this time in one shot. Beautiful area, doing a lot. You'll hear here a pump that has been running all night. It was running when I went by it last night in the water, an unwatered area of the canal. They're doing a lot of work in this area, and it's unclear to me what its purpose is, but obviously it's necessary for it to run 24/7 from the Park Service's perspective, which is kind of unfortunate because it is looks like a diesel pump, so oh well. Not exactly a low carbon situation there, but that's what it is. All right, we'll be moving on to the mission. Operation Get Back My Strap. Ooh, that's a terrible mission name. All right, Operation Retrieval has begun. Better name, I guess. I feel like I can be a little more open and notorious now because, well, I'm not camping here. I'm not doing anything I think that's problematic by being back here. Ooh, ow! They're very, very prickly. I think they're wild roses back here. It's a very wet area. I think I already recognized the tree stand where I was. And and I see my strap. Fantastic. I'm gazing back up to the area where there was some exposure for this wild camp. I don't see anybody up there. Wouldn't expect anybody at this hour. It's a little early. But here we are. Well, that's fantastic. I knew I'd be back here. Saved me about $10 to replace these, but I think that in addition to not wanting to needlessly spend $10, I kind of like these straps. They're not orange and black, but they're red and black. They're kind of pleasing to work with. New style strap that, at least, I mean, they may have been around forever, but new to me. They have multiple loops all along the strap, so rather than wrapping the strap around the tree a bunch of times to try to align a single loop at the end, you have a lot more flexibility. Oh, hi. My old friend, the spiders of the C&O, just had yet another hunting spot destroyed by me. Sorry, spiders. I'm probably not popular in the arachnid world. It's very clear. There's a kind of a worn path. It seems clear that people come back here, I think. Now, part of it is it's at a kind of natural spot where one would expect it, not one of the offshoots of the trail here. So I don't think I'm the first person to have camped back there. Nice spot. Ooh, there's a couple of, wow, a whole bunch of white-tailed deer. Unfortunately, in this audio medium, you won't be able to catch it. Again, just sort of that magical part the very beginning of fall, or very end of the summer, where the first tree leaves are falling, just sort of fluttering down. You've still got that magnificent green, but little spots of yellow raining down, like yellow snow. Again, something I should have thought about before I started saying it. All right, I'm going to throw this strap into a pannier so I don't lose it, and I can reunite it with its friend, and it can tell that friend anthropomorphically about its great lengthy C&O camping adventure. But in the interim, it's time to wrap things up and head back to DC. And I can kind of wrap up the thoughts here on S24Os as I complete this mission. But like any good mission, you got to get home before it's complete, right? Or at least to your destination. That's the problem with mountaineering. I feel like that, especially for the real high peak alpinists, summit fever sometimes ends up being the end of their setup. All right, so I am reascending up the gravel road here to the C&O, and I'm realizing I was tracking this on my watch, so I will resume it. And I can talk a little bit more about some takeaways for this S24O. And it's funny to do a takeaway on such a short trip, but I think you always have takeaways every time you ride, I find. And I think my first takeaway is do it. It's such an easy way to get that bit of adventure in. And if you're listening to this show, whether you've done a ton of touring, more than me, less than me, never done it before, and the reason why I do it is to bring some adventure to my life. Simple, accessible adventure when you really get down to it. Outwardly, it seems like, people are amazed as if you're doing something superhuman. And I've talked about that on the show before. I guess I get some satisfaction out of that, but I get the vast majority of my satisfaction out of what it means to me, because I don't really do this for other people. Well, except for you all, I suppose, but that's the podcast part. I would be doing all these little adventures with or without a podcast. So that's takeaway number one. Go ahead and get out and do it. So wherever you're listening to me from, you've got an opportunity to do something like this. You've got a park, you've got a stealth camp, you've got all sorts of different opportunities. Maybe you can bike directly to it like I can. Maybe you have to get a little extra transportation help to start and finish. But you've got it near you. It's just a question of kind of looking it up, making it happen, and making the time for it. But the beauty is that this fits in nicely into gaps that most of us have. Say you've got a 9-to-5 job. It is possible to pull this off around a weekend. Not even eat up the whole weekend. You could do this on a Friday night, come back Saturday morning, and there you go. You've got your whole weekend. So if you've got commitments or plans or anything along those lines, family obligations, as so many of us have, you can get back, but you can still fit it in and still feel like you went on a tour. I think number two is, this counts. This is not, by any stretch of the imagination, cycling from the Arctic Circle to Tierra. That is different. It's a different kind of long-term cycling. But what this is bike touring or bike packing or gravel grinding. Parts of the C&O here certainly qualify for the gravel grind. But this counts. Don't be afraid to do stuff like this because you don't think it's big enough or broad enough or whatever. In fact, I would argue that this is kind of the perfect type of bike touring for folks who don't have the time or don't have the funds, maybe don't have the vacation setups, this is what you can do. If you want to get started, also I think that this is a great way to do it. This definitely counts. That's takeaway number 2 for you all. Takeaway number 3 is be open to the adventure. When I went into this, it was centered around, okay, I've got the time and let's go out and ride. But I also had that little mission to accomplish. And so I kind of embraced that element. I was open to the adventure. I was going to go in and liberate that strap. Is that kind of a small thing? Sure. But it's a thing. And can give your S24O a bit of purpose beyond just maybe the fitness goals and the get back to nature goals. So be open to that adventure. You may notice in the background some additional traffic. Capitol Beltway seems to be unusually busy. It's moving. We go underneath a bridge here on the C&amp. That is part of I-495, Capitol Beltway. I'm sure I've mentioned it. This to me is the real mark of leaving DC proper. It's kind of popularly, we hear inside and outside the Beltway. Well, this is the Beltway. There's also a nice bit of a downhill going in this direction, so you may hear that as we travel along here. We go underneath a major thoroughfare, very close to. It's only about maybe 10, 12 feet above my head. And you may hear the sound difference here underneath. I certainly feel it. Whoa! Remember when I told you about gravel grinding? That's a spot. It's always nice to pick up a little speed in this section. For whatever reason, this is probably a drop of... Boy, I'd have to check the stats, but it feels like it's at least 20 feet. Which may not seem like a lot, but it's 20 feet over a relatively short span. And especially if it's at the end of a long day of riding from, say, Harper's Ferry, and it's hot, boy, that always feels good. And then there's a slight incline. Not nearly as much, but it slows your momentum down as you ride along. Takeaway number 4. Embrace the change of seasons. That's another one of my takeaways. Boy, I have been loving this very dramatic shift to fall. Summer gives us so much as bike tourists, and it's so great to have those long days, to be able to not only bang out miles, but see the sights, enjoy the trip, enjoy the journey more than the point to point. Another downhill section, you can probably feel that. Summer gives us so much opportunity with the long days to enjoy the journey. I mean, it's a cliche, enjoy the journey more than the destination. Summer gives us that opportunity, even though for me, I don't love the heat, as I've talked about on and on and on again on the show. But, you embrace it and you try to go for it. You don't let it stand in your way. Just like I don't let rain stand in the way of my enjoyments of a trip. But I do have to say, watching these leaves fall and seeing that physical change, it's really delightful. Delightful AF, as the kids say. I'm not sure if the kids say that. But it is nice to see what is the last bit of summer here of starting to give way to the influences of fall. And that's just fantastic. It's a great time to go out for a ride. And I kind of nailed the S24O timing because, yesterday was a very summery, muggy, hot day, and today is very much a early fall day. And it's kind of nice to see that. And my 5th and final takeaway for S24Os, and this one in particular, is treat yourself. It is worth it. It is something that you deserve. maybe you've had a rough time, maybe you've had some transitions, maybe you've had some success, maybe you got something new to celebrate. But these are treats. These are just delightful things to add into your life. And if you can find that little interstitial space, if you can have somebody watch the dogs for you, I happen to have a loving partner who can help me out with that and take the load. I'm fortunate enough to have a partner who is taking a little bit of the extra load this morning, walking the dogs where normally we would split that. And it's just nice to have that. Of course, we got the daycare for Mookie, because he and Gizmo love to scrap. They love a scrap. So, we've got the ability to make that happen and to give myself this ability to do this. And so it's a treat to be able to do stuff like this. And I'm mindful of that. And it's been a nice way to celebrate this day, this less than 24-hour period. And the name itself, sub 24-hour outing, out and back, or whatever it is, S24Os are just fantastic for that kind of thing. It's a nice way to do more than just a long ride. It's a way to fit in a mini tour. And in this instance, I feel like, I kind of wrapped up that C&O tour from a few weeks ago that felt incomplete. And so as a result, I treated myself in a couple of different ways. So that's great. One bit of an addendum, since I am sort of calling this a coda, if you will, to that tour journal. As I've been rolling through these miles, it's between mile marker 0 and mile marker 17. I'm about halfway back. I have seen the great evidence of that storm and trees, big trees, that are all chopped up and along the side of the trail during a fair stretch close to DC. And I think I am seeing real evidence that my decision to take the train back was a good one that day. Today is cool and comfortable, and that day was as hot and as miserable as any other day. I think it hit triple digits in the heat index, and there would have been a lot of trees to go up, under, around, and that would have been a rough time. Oh, and with a time deadline for me. So I do think that this coda here, this revisiting of those sections of the impacted trail, demonstrate pretty clearly, in addition to the post on Facebook that I saw from somebody who wrote it that day, that was the right call for me. And as always with the C&O, particularly this section, I'm on it quite a bit, and I can use an S24O to get out and see it, ride it, and experience it. So that is the coda, and finally closing the chapter on Tour Journal Volume 16 and the not so hot and sweltery conditions that it began with.
And as always, we'd like to close out the show with a special shout out to the Pedalshift Society. Because of support from listeners like you, Pedalshift is a weekly bicycle touring podcast with a global community, expanding into live shows, meetups, tour journals, you name it. If you like what you hear, you can support the show for $5, $2, or even $1 a month. And there's one-shot and annual options if you're not into the whole small monthly thing. Check it all out at pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lean, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Dittis, Thomas Skadow, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Harry Telgadis, Chris Barron, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hipwell, Stuart Buchan, Mr. T, Roxy Arning, Nathan Poulton, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Paul Culbertson, Scott Culbertson, Cody Forchinger, Tom Beninati, Greg Braithwaite, Sandy Pizzio, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Joseph Quinn, Drew Porter, Byron Patterson, Joachim Robert, Ray Jackson, Jeff Fry, Kenny Mikey, Lisa Hart, John Denkler, Steve Hankel, Miguel Quinones, Alejandro Aviles Reyes, Keith Spangler, Greg Towner, Dan Gephardt, Jody Zeranin, Lucas Barwick, Michael Baker, Brian Bechtal, Reinhard Biggle, Greg Middlemiss, Connie Moore, William Gothman, Brian Benton, Joan Churchill, Mike Bender, Rick Weinberg, Billy Crafton, Gary Matushak, Greg Latois Lopez, James Sloan, Jonathan Dillard, John Funk, Tom Bilch, Ronald Paroli, Dave Roll, Brian Hafner, Misha LeBlanc, Ari Messinger, and David Grotke. And thanks also to all past and anonymous donors for helping make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.